Hello, I'm osukarui and I mostly speedrun obscure N64 games. These games generally don't have a lot of speedrunning documentation, so in this series I want to document my personal experience when speedrunning these games. I'll therefore cover the history of the game as a speed game, talk about speed strats, interesting movement tech, and glitches, along with the world record progression for the game. I hope you enjoy. In the last video, we covered my third N64 speed game, Army Man Sarge's Heroes, and now it's time for the next game, Shadow Man. Speedrunning this game was probably my strangest speedrunning journey so far. I'm just going to go ahead and say this, I only ever did one full game run for this game, and to this day, this run remains the world record for the game. This video is essentially the story of how I completed that one run. A little background though before we start. Shadow Man is a third-person action-adventure horror game that was released in 1999, where you play as Michael Leroy, or Shadow Man, a voodoo warrior trying to save the world from Legion, the bad guy in the game. It was released on several different platforms, but I will only be talking about the N64 version in this video. Now, the seed for this speedrunning journey of mine starts long before I ever knew that speedrunning was even a thing, more than 15 years ago, or sometime around 2006 or 7. In those days, I would sometimes go to the local second-hand record store, which also sold some old video games, and I would browse through the handful of N64 games they sold. One fateful day, I came across Shadow Man without having any idea what game it was. But I thought it looked interesting, so I bought it. I rushed home, excited to play this new game, only to find that I had actually bought an NTSC or American cartridge. I, however, live in Iceland in Europe, so the game did not work on my PAL console. Disappointed, I put the game in a box with the rest of my cartridges, where it stayed for around 13 years. Around 10 years later, I would get into speedrunning, and as I explained in my Carmageddon 64 video, at some point I got an NTSC console. One day, while sorting out all my N64 stuff, I came across my old Shadow Man cartridge, and I thought, I wonder if this game has been speedrun. So I looked it up and soon found two runs that piqued my interest. The first was the world record on speedrun.com. Now, just to get the world record progression out of the way, to the best of my knowledge, there have only been 9 RTA world records set. The first two were by Wouter Jansen, who first got a 2 hours, 49 minutes and 4 seconds run on the 16th of March 2013, and then a 2 hours, 45 minutes and 8 seconds run on the 8th of July the same year. Then the runner Cartridge Gamer would set at least 6 world records from January to May 2016, ending with a run clocking in at 2 hours, 28 minutes and 48 seconds on the 25th of May. This last run was the world record I found on speedrun.com, so this was clearly a fairly long speedrun. However, I mentioned I found 2 videos, and the other video I found was a lot faster. The other run, a segmented run by the previously mentioned Wouter Jansen, finished in 44 minutes and 43 seconds, almost 2 hours faster than the world record. I was intrigued by this, so I started looking into what was going on. Throughout the game, you have to collect something called Dark Souls, of which there are 120 in total, kind of like the stars in Super Mario 64. And just like how you need the stars in Super Mario 64, in Shadow Man you need a certain number of Dark Souls to open certain doors. Now, in Mario you don't have to collect all the stars to finish the game, you only need 70. And in Shadow Man it's sort of the same, except you only need 95 souls to finish the game. All of the previously mentioned records collected 95 souls. But it turns out that this 95 soul cap can actually be circumvented, just like the 70 star cap in Mario. In Mario you have the 16 star category, and in Shadow Man you can beat the game with 15 souls. And the Mario comparison continues. In Mario you use the backwards long jump, or BLJ for short, to skip the 70 star requirement. And in Shadow Man you also use a backwards long jump to skip the 95 soul requirement. In summary, Shadow Man is basically just a horror version of Super Mario 64. But okay, how does the backwards long jump work in Shadow Man? Well, let's go through the route that Wouter used to finish his segmented run. He started in a place called Lifeside and then proceeded to the Morrow Gates. Morrow Gates sort of functions like a hub world from where you can enter other places in the game. From Morrow Gates, he started by entering the Wastelands, which only require 1 Dark Soul. He would then warp back to the Morrow Gates and enter Asylum, which requires 3 Dark Souls. And there he would collect a few more to reach 15 souls. After that he was able to enter the Cageways, and from there he entered a place called the Engine Block, sometimes called the Piston Room, and that's where the magic happens. In the engine room there are 4 moving pistons blocking your way. Normally you would have to turn off all of the pistons to get through the room, but what you can do instead is lure an enemy called a surgeon from a different room into the piston room. And then if you jump backwards while grinding into the side of the enemy, you will gain a speed boost, allowing you to jump farther. This boost is just barely enough to let you reach the top of the walls surrounding the pistons. And from there you can just run across the room to enter the final boss in the game. I should mention that according to Wouter, this skip was discovered by Le Courier 103. At this point I was immediately intrigued. If this trick saved 2 hours, you wouldn't even need a good run to snag the world record. So it essentially seemed like a free world record up for grabs. I therefore decided I might as well have a go at it. I started playing through the route, getting a feel for the tricks and skips used in the run, and although it had some very tricky jumps that would be hard to nail if you were going for an optimized time, I didn't care and essentially could fail these jumps for minutes on end without it affecting my world record chances. After reaching the piston room, it was time to tackle the beast, which was the BLJ across the gap. Now, it's very favorable that if you die in Shadow Man, you just reset at your last checkpoint. And there are no lives, so you can just die over and over without any game overs. And in the piston room there is a checkpoint right in front of the pistons, so you could keep doing attempts at jumping the gap over and over again, even though the guard would always eventually kill you. This was good news for me, since despite this being a speedrun, time was on my side. Now this trick is very precise, and I mean very precise. The guard keeps moving around, so just getting the boost is pretty tricky. But you also have to make sure you have the right angle. But since you are jumping backwards, you can't really see where you're aiming very well. But luckily, I found a somewhat consistent way to do it. It turns out that the surgeon's AI is a bit wonky when it comes to doors. You see, if you stand in front of this door right here, it will open, and for some reason the surgeon will run to the front of the door, and then once he is there, he will just spin in circles endlessly until you close the door. And while he is spinning, he won't shoot or hit you at all. So while he is in this spinning state, you can take your time to set up the correct angle for the jump and then jump once you are ready. With this method, I even managed to pull off the trick many times in a row. After figuring this out, I entered the final boss room and started learning how to beat the boss. And this is where I encountered the first real problem on this speedrunning journey. This boss is difficult, and I mean real difficult. And since I had skipped most of the game, I didn't really have any good weapons, spells, or increased health. You basically just have your starting pistol, the shadow gun, which is extremely weak. By holding the shoot button, you can charge the gun to make the shot more powerful, but you still need something like 70 or 80 shots like that to kill the boss. And even hitting the boss can be tricky. In the segmented run, Wouter spends around 13 minutes just fighting the boss, because killing him with a shadow gun is just so slow. The boss has a variety of attacks, including homing missiles, so you need to be constantly moving. And avoiding some of his shots seems to be simply impossible, so you will inevitably lose some health. Now, if you die fighting the boss, you will respawn in the piston room on the other side of the pistons, so you will have to do the piston BLJ again if you want to finish the game. Now, since I had gotten the BLJ somewhat consistent, I was okay if I needed to reset a few runs to beat the boss. But the problem was that I could not beat the boss a single time during my practice. After having tried to beat him more than 20 times without a single success, I was starting to be a bit afraid I would not be able to pull off this so-called free world record at all. Now, at this point, I had already spent a lot of time on this project. I had spent a bunch of time learning the route and a ton of time practicing and theory crafting ways to cheese the final boss, which ended up not working at all. It's really disheartening to spend countless hours learning a speedrun only to realize you can't finish a single run. I wanted to find a solution to killing the boss, but I didn't know the game at all. I had never played the game casually, so some of the skips I had learned in the route, I didn't have a clue what I was even skipping. So anything that Wouter's segmented run didn't show, I didn't know about. I almost gave up at this point. I did think about trying to beat a bit more of the game to get some more health and better weapons for the fight, but then I would have to learn the game, and this game is huge, so that didn't seem too appealing. I generally don't really like horror games because I get spooked so easily, so I really didn't want to play the game casually. What I had found out during my research is that the strongest weapon in the game is a gun called the Violator. I decided, just for fun, to see where this gun was, and if there would be any chance of getting it in order to beat the boss. Being the strongest weapon, I figured it would be somewhere towards the end of the game. But, to my surprise, it was actually in an area called Playrooms, which only required 23 souls to enter. Okay, that was convenient, but however, to get the Violator, you would need at least 4 accumulators. Accumulators are essentially just keys to open the case where the gun is. I would need 3 of them to get the gun itself, and then 1 to get the ammo for the gun. So I started looking at guides to see where these accumulators were. There are 5 accumulators in the game. One of these accumulators is in an area called Down Street Station, 1 is in an area called Mordant Street, and 3 of them are in Gardell Prison. All of these areas can be accessed through the Cathedral of Pain, which can be accessed from the asylum. But to open the pathways to these areas, you need additional keys called retractors, 1 for each area. Luckily, there is 1 retractor in the playrooms where you collect the Violator, and another retractor in the cageways, which we passed through earlier in the game, so we have keys to 2 of these areas. The last retractor can only be accessed at the end of the game. Now, using 1 retractor to open up Mordant Street, we can get 1 accumulator. That's 1 down. Then, of course, we use the other to enter Gardell Prison, where there are 3 more accumulators. And remember, we need 4, so this is looking pretty good. But in the prison, 2 of the accumulators are collectible, but the last one requires an item called a calabash, which is essentially a bomb. But the problem is that the calabash is in the Temple of Blood, which requires 71 Dark Souls to enter, and that's way too many to collect. So, after spending even more time to figure all this out, I was essentially stuck at 3 out of 4 accumulators, and all hope seemed lost at this point. But luckily, during my research, I stumbled upon a YouTube video called Shadowman 2 Violators Early Glitch by someone called Viatspan. This glitch allows you to dupe the Violator, allowing you to get 2 Violators instead of just 1. Now, this trick showed how the first accumulator could actually be collected with only 2 accumulators instead of 3. You could then use the third one to collect it a second time. I wouldn't need to collect a second Violator, but instead I could use the first half of the trick to get the first Violator with only 2 accumulators instead of 3. So, with this trick, the accumulator requirement went from 4 to 3, which was exactly how many I was able to get. So, with this, a route started forming. I would start by going through the same areas as Wouter did in his run. First Lifeside, then the Wastelands, and then Asylum. In Asylum, I would make sure to enter the Cathedral of Pain to be able to warp back there later. I would then enter the Cageways and finish collecting 23 Dark Souls, plus the 1 retractor in the Cageways. I would then use these 23 souls to enter the Playrooms, where I would first trigger a warp location so I could warp back there later, and then head on to collect the retractor there. Then, having 2 retractors, I would warp back to the Cathedral of Pain, and from there I could first enter Gardel Jail to gather 2 accumulators, and then warp back to the Cathedral to enter Mordant Street, where I would pick up the 3rd accumulator. After that, I would warp back to the Playrooms and use the glitch there, using 2 accumulators to get the Violator and 1 to get the ammo. After that, I would head to the engine block where the piston is and do the piston skip to enter the final fight, this time armed with the most powerful gun in the game. Now, I just want to take a moment here to appreciate just how convenient this route is. I find it kind of amazing that using this route you can just barely get the most powerful gun in the game very early. You need 2 retractors and there are exactly 2 retractors available. You need 3 accumulators and there are exactly 3 available. The glitch makes this just barely possible. Now, this 23 Violator route does lose around 30 minutes compared to the 15 soul route used in Wouter's segmented run. But that still meant I had around 80 minutes of time save compared to the world record, which was plenty. With the Violator, the final boss fight was relatively easy, so now I was ready to start doing runs. I booted up my console, went through the route and started doing piston skip attempts. And that's when the next problem arose. Remember how I mentioned I had found a somewhat consistent way to do the piston skip? Well, I had been testing that on an emulator, and it turns out the emulated version and the console version are vastly different. On the emulator there is less lag, so the guard moves a lot faster. This means that the boosts you get are a lot stronger compared to console. And actually on emulator the main problem was actually jumping too far and overshooting the platform. However, on console it's a completely different story. You essentially need a perfect jump to make it across the gap. Now, the consistent method I had found was using the door to make the surgeon enemy spin, but as you can see, the location of the door makes it so you need a slightly longer jump to reach the platform, which basically means you can't make that jump on console. To make it on console, you need to jump from the spots where the jump distance is the shortest if you want to make it across. Now, I spent a lot of time in that darn piston room trying to find something consistent. I tried all sorts of glitch hunting and jumping, manipulating the enemy, trying to approach the piston from another room, I even bought a PAL copy of the game to try on PAL to see if the lag there would make any difference. Ultimately, I didn't find anything useful, and I just had to accept the fact that I would have to grind out this incredibly difficult trick. So the grind started. Now, just to describe the process, I would play through the route leading up to the piston skip, and that would generally take me around 60 to 70 minutes. I did decide I would go for at least a sub 2 hour run, so that left me around 40 to 50 minutes of attempts for the piston skip. Now, the piston skip grind did have some nuances to it. First of all, the surgeon enemy keeps trying to hurt you, both by hitting you and shooting you, and you only have a total of 5 health. On the other side of the piston room, next to the final boss, there are 2 more health points to fill, so losing 2 health points is okay. Preferably, you want to reach the other side of the piston room with 3 health. Having less than that will make the boss fight that much more difficult. Now, getting to the other side of the piston room with 3 health points is easier said than done. The surgeon keeps trying to shoot or hit you while you're making your attempts. So if your health drops too low, you have to let the surgeon kill you and respawn to try again. As for the BLJ itself, making the incredibly difficult jump is actually not enough, since after you land the jump, you still have to navigate this incredibly narrow ledge to make it to the other side. And while you do that, the surgeon will keep trying to shoot you, making you lose more health if you do this too slowly. During my grind, I had multiple jumps that made it across the gap, but due to low health, I tried to go too fast across the ledge, which resulted in me slipping off. Or if I tried to go too slowly, the surgeon would shoot me and kill me while on the ledge. So overall, this trick is just stupidly annoying, with many parts that have to go just right. I'm not sure how many runs I did, but my attempt counter says 14 on my finished run. And assuming I often start the splits once to see if everything is working properly, I would guess I did something like 7 to 10 runs, or around 15 to 20 hours of grinding. And every run was just an hour of diverse gameplay and then 50 minutes of grinding this one grueling trick. On the 9th of March 2020, I managed to get into the final boss with good health, but not on very good pace. That run was on pace to be around 2 hours and 10 minutes. One thing I didn't really factor into my plan though was nerves. After grinding for something like 15 hours and then getting the jump across with good health and without slipping off or dying after the jump, I was extremely nervous when I entered the boss room, and I completely choked the fight and died, even though I had the violator. This was extremely disheartening, and I remember being so frustrated with the game. A part of me wanted to stop right there. But again, with all the time I had spent, that would have been very unfortunate. So I kept going. And the next day, on the 10th of March, I started another run and got the piston skip again. This time on even better pace. My practice during the grind was clearly making the jump a bit more consistent. Although I was extremely nervous during the fight, I managed to finish it and set a new world record, clocking in at 1 hour, 38 minutes and 16 seconds. After more than 100 hours of glitch hunting, theory crafting, researching, routing and running, I had finally finished my world record goal with this random game I bought at a second-hand record shop more than 15 years earlier.
Yes! This was the one flaw in your plan, Legion. The
my
Dark
God.
Souls have given me the power
It's
to defeat
over.
you. I've read my prophecy. And
Oh my
Legion
God, I'm
shall
so
take
nervous.
the Dark Souls unto him. Well,
Oh
here
God.
they are.
That's a new world record. First ever RTA piston skip on N64.
I think it's time to make a fast exit.
Oh my God.
Now, just to be clear, although I am in some ways very proud of being the first person to get an RTA record using the Piston Skip, this run is a very bad speedrun. I lost around 10 minutes to bad gameplay during the first half of the run, and then around 17 minutes to Piston Skip. So, even using this slow and safe violator route, you can probably go as low as 1 hour and 5 or 10 minutes. Then, of course, as Wouter has clearly shown, there are people out there who are much more talented than I am when it comes to both performing Piston Skip and finishing the final boss with the Shadow Gun. So, it is definitely very doable to finish a run in around 40 minutes. So for anyone that wants to pick up the game and try it out, the world record is still pretty free for anyone willing to put in the time and grind to get it. So although my run is super bad, it's definitely good enough for me. And I've already spent way more time on this speed game than I ever intended to. I think this run I performed serves as a testament to the versatility of speedrunning. I used to have this idea that speedrunning was very rigid, and when you learn a run, you learn the route, the strats, and how to perform the glitches in order to go as fast as possible. And I used to think that was all there was to it. But the more I speedrun, the more I learn how fluid speedrunning really is. You will always have to carve your own path through a game so that it fits your needs. On a macro level, you have to choose your route and what tricks to go for, and even on a micro level, you always have to find your own ways of performing these tricks by finding your own approach to learning a trick, whether it be by your own visual cues, angles, timings, or whatnot. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that for my speedrunning journey with Shadow Man, I had to carve out a path that worked for me. And even though I had to sacrifice a lot of time because of a way longer and safer route, that's okay. When I ran Shadow Man, it didn't result in any sort of optimized run, but it did take me on a speedrunning journey where I had to find ways to overcome my obstacles. And no matter the result, that on its own was a valuable experience that I appreciate and I'm very grateful for. My feelings are very mixed when it comes to Shadow Man on the N64. In some ways, I kind of hate the game because of Piston Skip and the final boss. But in other ways, I really appreciate the journey the game put me through. After all, the solutions I had to come up with ended up being kind of fun. Like I mentioned before, I really don't like horror games, and this game constantly kept me on edge. So, towards the end of my grind, I felt like I was going slightly insane because of nerves, frustration, and fatigue. I will probably never run this game again, but I hope others will. I have never played the game casually, but apparently it's a very good game. If anyone out there is contemplating running the game, there are many options to choose from. You could do the no piston skip category, where you need to collect 95 Dark Souls, or even the 120 Souls category. There is even a 100% category as well, which makes you collect all the souls, and also 512 items called Kaitos scattered throughout the game. However, if you intend to go for any percent, you can either go for the hardcore, faster 15 soul shadowgun only route, or my slower and easier 23 soul violator route. And then there is one more possibility, which frankly might be the best one yet: emulator. Some speed games like Toy Story 2, Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue have a much more active emulator scene than console. The emulator category has over 40 players on the leaderboard, but console only has 10. I don't see any reason why Shadow Man couldn't do the same. Piston Skip is so much easier on emulator that honestly I think it would be a lot more enjoyable running on emulator, and running on emulator would probably increase the odds of this game forming any sort of N64 speedrunning community. A very talented PC runner for Shadow Man called Wako did some emulator runs and got a run clocking in at 49 minutes, but for some reason this run is not on the leaderboards anymore. I am unfortunately somewhat of a console purist, so I will generally always go for running on console when possible, but I don't see any reason against playing Shadow Man on emulator. Honestly, from a speedrunning perspective, it's probably the superior way of playing. If you are interested in more Shadow Man speedrunning, I will put a link to the speedrun.com site for Shadow Man in the description of the video. I think this game can be a fantastic speed game. The movement honestly feels very good in my opinion, and the game offers some very precise jumps and skips that can be very satisfying to perform as well. As for glitch hunting, I believe there's still a lot of things that haven't been researched yet, especially on the N64. And who knows, maybe a consistent piston skip or a final boss cheese is out there waiting to be discovered. So hopefully this game gets more speedrunning love in the future. And I sincerely hope that someone beats my any percent run soon, since I feel it has long overstayed its welcome as the world record. Anyway, that's the end of this video. Again, thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for my next video, which will be about the previously mentioned Toy Story 2 Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue.